did not know what we know, that baby in uterine fluid would one day walk on water. He did not know that the blind would see, and the deaf would hear, and the dead would live again. Joseph didn't know all of that. All he knew was that in faith, if he played his role, that God could do something extraordinary through the obedience of an average Joe. Joseph is a man that puts family first. And the reason why that's important to emphasize is because Joseph must have had some mixed feelings. Remember, I told you Joseph was just a man. He's a righteous man. But Joseph, my friends, had a dilemma. You see, on one hand, he had the law. On the other hand, he had his lawfully wedded wife. On one hand, he had the right to divorce her. But on the other hand, he had the opportunity to marry her. On one hand, he had the right to have her stoned. On the other, he felt an obligation to protect her and make her feel secure. On one hand, there was something that was said in the law. On the other hand, it was what God willed. And when he weighed his options, Joseph said, I'm going to follow the will of God, and I'm going to put my family first. And I'm bringing this up because this holiday season is a fresh opportunity for us to spend some time with our families. And for many of us, it's a sacred time. Then there's those of us among us who may have some mixed feelings about our family. Here's my question to you. What is God asking you to do this season to put your family first? What shifts do you have to make in your schedule? What obstacles do you have to overcome? What call do you have to make? What do you need, or who do you need to forgive so you can put your family first? That's what Joseph does. He puts his family first. It was Shauna Letlier in a remarkable book, Remarkable Advent. She helps me to imagine how that happened. Look how she describes it. She says, imagine the emotional anguish rolling in Joseph's head and heart as he wrestled with what to do. He chewed on his lip as he silently rehearsed the angel's words, do not be afraid. So Joseph made a decision. He knocked on the door of Mary's father's house. Mary's father opened the door and smiled and let him in. Good morning, Joseph, he said. This is unexpected. Yes, I know, Joseph said, but I've come to take Mary home as my wife. Our betrothal time is nearly over, and our room I've been working on is finished, and I'm ready. Mary's father opened his mouth to call his daughter, but stopped when he turned and saw her already listening. Her eyes were glassy with grateful tears as she smiled at Joseph. Friends, I'd like to think that when Mary locked eyes with Joseph, that the reason why she teared up is because she knew in her heart that Joseph had made a decision to put family first. Can I just say a word to some brothers in the room? You want to make your wife or the woman in your life's heart melt? Make sure that she knows that next to God, you're putting her first. Not your job, not the guys, not the Buckeyes or the Browns, Lord have mercy. But baby, I'm putting you first. So for those of us who are husbands or aspire to be husbands, what are you doing to make sure your wife or the woman or the love of your life knows that next to God, that she comes first? I'm talking about, do you pray with her? Do you help her around the house or with the kids? Do you put things down and turn things off to give her your undivided attention? Do you just not date her but continue to court her? Sisters, y'all ought to give me some help. Have you hooked her up for Christmas? Do you sometimes let her hold the remote and change the channel so she can see what she wants to see? I'm just saying. That's what Joseph does. He lets Mary know that she's the priority. And not just that she's the priority, but the baby she's carrying is a priority as well. That's what I love about Joseph. He allows his actions to speak louder than his words. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't tell her that you love her. You better. And I'm not saying don't give your child words of affirmation. That's important. But what I am saying is when you prioritize your family, that there are times when your actions will speak louder than your words. You see, I read my Bible before I came here. What I discovered is that for 4 Gospels, Pastor Julia, the Bible doesn't really say much about Joseph. Mark never calls his name. He only shows up twice in John. And Matthew and Luke treat him like an extra. But here's the testimony of Joseph. I don't have to be extraordinary to fulfill my divine assignment. My assignment is to be there for my family. And get this, not just for his biological family, but for his spiritual family as well. Because listen, you don't have to be biologically connected to have spiritual influence. Hear me, Joseph is not the biological father, but he still raises them. Even though technically the child is not his. That's why we ought to thank God for those among us who have raised children and are raising children who are not originally theirs. Amen? Thank God for those of us who bear that responsibility. But let's not, Vineyard Columbus, overlook the lesson that Joseph teaches. Every child of God needs not only their biological family, but a spiritual family to thrive as well. Let me bring it a little bit close to home. Every child in our church, here at Cooper, or at any of our campuses, needs both a family by birth and a family in the faith. That they can benefit from having some spiritual mothers and some spiritual fathers and some spiritual aunties and uncles that help raise them in the fear and the admonition of the Lord. Listen, that's why BC Kids at all of our campuses need our help. In fact, if you are a member of Vineyard Columbus, hear me in the spirit. Hear me in the spirit. I am asking you today as a pastor, right after the service, to consider stopping by the counter of our children's ministry and offer them your help. Because again, every child of God needs their biological family, but can also benefit from having a spiritual family that helps them achieve their God-given purpose. That's what we witness Joseph doing. He puts righteousness ahead of his passions. He prioritizes prayer. He places family first. And then get this, he promotes the purpose of Christ. Because in verse 21, the angel tells Joseph, she will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save people from their sins. They must understand, Vineyard, that in Jewish culture, the names are especially significant because names are connected to purpose. And that Joseph, as the legal father, has the right to name the child. Don't miss this. Because what that suggests is that Joseph could have named the child to promote his own purpose. Because remember now, Mary was found to be pregnant, which suggests there's a rumor going around the community where people are wondering who the daddy is. So Joseph could have erased the scandal simply by taking charge of the name. He could have said, my girl been gone for 3 months. She comes back pregnant. So if I name the baby Little Joe, everybody would think it's my child. That gets rid of the scandal. I could say it was me, that's why she left. She came back and I married her, problem solved. Joseph could have leveraged this for his own purpose. But instead, Joseph names the baby what the angel said the baby should be named. Because again, the name is connected to his purpose. God says you're going to call him Jesus because he is going to save. But if you interfere with the name, you're also interfering with the purpose. So Joseph, I need you to surrender your purpose to God's purpose. I need you to surrender your will to God's will. I need you to sacrifice your plan to God's plan. And God's plan all along was that Jesus would save the world. Why did God choose Joseph? Because God knew that he could trust Joseph to promote the purposes of Christ. And the purpose of Christ was to save people from their sins. Joseph may not have understood all of that. He may not have understood the greater purposes of God. And he certainly didn't know then the full significance of the Christ child being born. He did not know what you and I, Vineyard Columbus, know. That child being developed in Mary's womb was actually heaven's salvation plan for planet Earth. He did not know what we know. That baby in uterine fluid would one day walk on water. He did not know that the blind would see, and the deaf would hear, and the dead would live again. Joseph didn't know all of that. All he knew was that in faith, if he played his role, that God could do something extraordinary through the obedience of an average Joe. This is the message of Joseph, that God can do the extraordinary when you and I are simply obedient to God. What in this Advent season is God asking you to do? And I'm asking because God is still looking for Josephs, just ordinary people living ordinary lives, simply in obedience to God. What is it, my friend, that God is asking you to surrender to God? Amen?